Okay, so let's talk about some basic SharePoint settings that we can control. Now, I'm already logged into my Microsoft 365. So I'm going to click here, bring up my whole list of apps. I'm going to go to Admin. And from Admin, I want to click on Show All and then go to my SharePoint Admin Center. So first off, we have our little or our SharePoint dashboard here, the homepage. And like the other homepages in our different admin centers, we have a bunch of cards here that we can manage. So I can click on it and remove it, move it to somewhere else, left, right, up, down. I can add additional cards here. If there's information that at the moment I've got all of my cards on there by default, but if I take one out, I can add it back in. So this lets me customize my little home page. Now we've got two options here for major settings for the SharePoint system as a whole, settings and policies. Policies, we have sharing and access control. And this is going to be a little more of our security settings. Let's actually start there. I'm going to click on sharing, and this controls my external sharing. So I've got four options here. Notice this is for SharePoint and OneDrive. I control both of them here. Do I want to share with anyone? So users can share files and folders with links that don't require sign-in. New and existing guests means they have to create a guest account or have an existing guest account, so they have to be able to log in. Existing guests means only ones that are existing now. We can't add any new guests to this, and then this is with only people in our organization. And so we control that by moving these up and down from most permissive to least permissive and setting the options wherever we want. Now, notice again, this is SharePoint and OneDrive. If you adjust SharePoint has to have, or SharePoint permissions, let me try this the other way around. OneDrive permissions cannot be more permissive than SharePoint. So I can't put SharePoint at one level and then raise OneDrive higher. I can make SharePoint more permissive than OneDrive, but not less. I also have some additional external sharing settings here. Limit sharing by domain, so I can have specific domains that we allow access to. Allow only users and specific security groups to share information, so not everybody. Allow guests to share items they don't own. That is checked by default, but that could be something that you want to take a careful look at and think, if I share something, do I want to allow the guest to reshare it? Guest access to a site or OneDrive will expire automatically, and then people who use a verification code must re-authenticate. So down here we have our file and folder links. Now, key thing here, choose a permission that's selected by default, choose the type of link that's selected by default. Okay, these are default settings, and when you go to share something, either a file or a folder link, then these will be the default settings that are applied. Now, when the user goes to share it, you can override a default. So this doesn't restrict anything, but it does set this is what's going to be the default. So choose a type of link that's selected by default. Only people in our organization, specific people, which means the user has to specify who. This is everybody in the organization, and this is to anyone. And then this is choose a permission that's selected. By default, do we want people to edit things that are shared with them or only view? We can also set links to expire after a certain number of days. And then this is a little more restricted. So these are default settings. This chooses what we're actually allowed to do. So these links can be given permissions. So files, do we want to be able to view and edit or view only? And then files and folders are view, edit, upload, or view only. So this is like the max permissions that we can give. This was who we could give permissions to. And then a handful of other settings here. When you're done, we just click Save to save our settings. Now, this has to do with file and folder sharing primarily. Access control has to do with how we manage access. So first off, can we restrict access from devices that aren't compliant or are not joined to a domain? Well, I actually can't turn that on because that requires a new subscription, enterprise mobility and security that I don't have. But I can set an idle session timeout, It's not enabled by default. Here's how I turn it on. How often or when do I want to sign users out? After how much time of inactivity? And then do I want to give them a warning notice before I do? So that's the idle session timeout. Network location lets me restrict this by IP address ranges. So I can say I'm only going to allow access from, and then I can put the IP address ranges that I want there. And then the last one is apps that don't use modern authentication. So block access from Office 2010 and other apps that can't enforce device-based restrictions. And so here's where I choose whether I want to block or allow. So those are my general policies that I set. My settings can be related, and here I see some of these are SharePoint settings, some of these are OneDrive settings. Some of these have actually moved. If you scroll over, by the way, you'll see what the current value is. Not particularly helpful. OneDrive, so set up home sites that link to via connections experiences. This is actually moved and is now in the Viva Connections in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. But we can enable notifications or allow notifications. For pages, we can set whether users are allowed to create and comment on pages. For site creation, we can allow whether users are allowed to create sites or not. And then where those sites would be located. So create team sites under, and then we can give them a specific URL group to be located on. We can set storage limits, and we can set version history limits. Okay, those are our basic settings for SharePoint. Now let's also take a look at some settings for some SharePoint sites, and then we will do another video where we'll talk about creating a new site. So I'm going to come to active sites. By the way, if you delete a site, you're going to find it here under deleted sites. And you can do that by selecting the site and then choosing to delete it. But let's look at some of our site settings right now. So I'm going to let's go to the Hobbit site just for the fun of it. So this is going to be a public group site. Here's my general information, including the description, the site info, what the location is, what the primary email address is. The activity is going to tell me what's gone on, including how much storage space is being used, but when was last site activity, how many page visits, how many files viewed and updated. Membership gives me access to members of the sites. So here I can set owners and members. And then settings is going to give me some generic settings. This is a public or a private group or site, public or private site. Do I want to allow people to email this site? Do I want to set a sensitivity label on this? Do I want to use a custom script? And external file sharing, how are we going to manage sharing settings for this particular site? Remember, we looked at this for the entire system-wide when we were in policies. Here we can do it on a per site basis. Okay, and then one last thing is right here is a link to go view the site or delete the site. Okay, so those are basic SharePoint settings that we can play with. And we can customize those however we want. It's going to be a big deal, especially if we're using SharePoint. We really want to think about how we are going to allow information to be shared through SharePoint and or OneDrive. So definitely some security concerns to keep in mind, things to think through before you start setting up your SharePoint access.